The Catholic faith and the existence of God in general are being challenged more and more in everyday life. But one thing remains clear: the importance of knowing your faith and being able to articulate why you believe it. And we're going to talk about real apologetics tonight on EWTN Live, so please stay with us. Thank you, and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa. Welcome to EWTN Live, where we bring you guests from all over the world. And our guest tonight has devoted more than 30 years of his life to adolescent and adult religious education, helping individuals around the country to be faithful to the charge of 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 15, which tells us to always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who calls you to account for the hope that is in you. He's the president of the Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America and the author of a book called The Reality of God, the layman's guide to scientific evidence for the Creator. So please welcome Mr. Stephen Hemler. Stephen,
thank you.
How you doing?
Good. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Now, where do you come from? Where are you coming here to?
Virginia. I was raised in Virginia. I went to Virginia Tech, got engineering degrees from Virginia Tech, bachelor's and master's, and worked in Tennessee for a while. Then we moved to the Middle East for 13 years, and then I took early retirement to follow a calling to serve God in the church full time.
You know, and I don't know about you, but I mean, I don't think I'll retire till they put me down, but until then, you know, I like it, you know, as I get older and being able to think cool things and talk and teach and all. It's kind of fun, isn't it?
Yes, you can do more of what you feel called to do and led to do instead of what you have to do. Right. All of our kids are grown, been married for 37 years, and they're all on their own. So I feel more free to be able to take a message of hope to so many parents, especially who are struggling with, worried about their children who are falling away from the faith. And so many of the other engineers that I worked with and people that I worked with were raised Catholic and no longer call themselves Catholic. Mm-hmm. In fact, 40%, surveys show that 40% of those who are raised Catholic no longer call themselves Catholic. Mm-hmm. So this is a massive loss, and I just feel called to try and help stem that loss if in some way we can help equip faithful Catholics to be able to explain better to their children, to their friends, to their neighbors, why we believe what we believe, and in particular, why we believe in God, and how science and religion are allies in the search for truth, and they're not in conflict with one another. There is a harmony.
See, and here's one of the things, too, that I think is very important about what you're doing. There are a number of reasons for people to have lost their faith. Mm-hmm. The culture's had all sorts of temptations away from living Catholic morality. Mm-hmm. We've had a lot of Catholics who stay inside the church and fell into the same temptations. Mm-hmm. And we also have, so we've got bad example inside the church, a lot of attraction to do things that look more fun until you get various diseases like alcoholism and, you know, drug overdose and STDs and all that stuff. But it looks good until that point. And then you've also got a lot of people who are trying to undermine the faith or who have honest questions about how do I integrate my faith with the realities of modern science. And none of us can take care of all those problems, but we can take care of the ones that we know how to do. That's why I appreciate your book. You know, that you are giving people some tools that I want you to talk about tonight. What are some of the ways that we can approach people who have questions about the inconsistency between science and faith?
Yes, and a lot of it comes from what's called the New Atheism, and they're, you know, Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, people like that,
God
who
rest his
actually,
soul.
yes, who actually attack theists, people that believe in God, and they, you know, books like The God Delusion, that was a best-selling book, and it misleads a lot of people.
And just to give a sense of who someone like Christopher Hitchens was, he said that not only was Mother Teresa of Calcutta a bad person, she was the wickedest person of the 20th century. And I said, wow, think of the competition she had. She had atheists like Mao Zedong and Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin, and she beat them out. But I digress. So how do we deal with something?
So there is this modern myth out there that religion and science are in conflict, and there is the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey used to say, that is not taught in schools, or we rarely see it on TV documentaries, and that's what I have in studying and reading, and it was just so exciting to learn these things, and I felt called to take them to a wider audience, primarily through our apologetics ministry, the Cana Apologetics Ministry, and the presentations that we do for parishes, schools, colleges, conferences, these multimedia, PowerPoint, video-based presentations that are very well received. And the one that is most popular covers the scientific and the human evidence of God's existence. And that's kind of what I'd like to talk about tonight.
Let's get into that. So what can science then tell us about the existence of God, or does science disprove that God exists?
So many people think that science disproves God exists, and there are many scientists, the top scientists, the vast majority, 95% are atheists, and so this is what our children are being exposed to when they go off to college and start reading books, science books and things, and engineering, and it begins to challenge the faith that they've been raised in. So there are many people who have these questions. Well, science actually, the rest of the story, supports faith, and it's not shared very often, and it's what I call the 3 C's, and it's a little bit even more than science. But the first C deals with the cosmos. Within the cosmos, there is compelling evidence of God's existence.
What do you mean by the cosmos?
Within the universe.
The universe, okay.
For example...
It's just the Greek word for universe. Universe is the Latin word. Cosmos is the Greek word.
Right. So within the universe, science has discovered some surprising things that do point to a transcendent creator. For example, the Big Bang. Nothing comes from nothing. So we have something. So, you know, if something came from nothing, then there has to be a cause of that. And the cause that makes the most sense is that there's a transcendent creator beyond space and time who fired that Big Bang off.
But when you say the Big Bang Theory, you know, this is not the comedy series. What do you mean by Big Bang Theory?
Okay, the story of its development, most people are probably a little bit familiar with it, so I'll just go over it briefly. But Albert Einstein, everybody's heard of him. His general theory of relativity pointed to the fact that the universe could either be expanding or contracting. But the prevailing opinion since the time of Aristotle was that the universe is static and eternal. It had always been there and it had always been the same.
And you know, this is, and that's an important thing for people to understand. The pagans, pagan philosophers, not idolaters, but people like Plato and Aristotle, deep thinkers, thought that the universe was eternal. And you see that same doctrine taught in Mormonism, for instance. That still is their doctrine, that the physical world is eternal.
And so Einstein didn't really like that. He put this fudge factor in his equations that took that out. Well, there was a Belgian priest in 1927, George Lemaitre, Father George Lemaitre, who was also an astronomer and a mathematician, and he figured out using Einstein's equations that you really can, that it makes more sense that the universe had a beginning. That if you rewound the clock, it came to a single point that has been expanding ever since. And people didn't like that theory at all. They dismissed it. All that's just a Big Bang.
Like it.
He didn't like it either. But it wasn't until 1929 that Edwin Hubble, we've all heard of the Hubble telescope, and we may not have known why he is so significant. Extremely significant discovery at Mount Wilson Observatory in California in 1929. He not only found out that ours is not the only galaxy, there's millions of more galaxies, but the most interesting thing is, by observing what's called the redshift in the stars, in the galaxies, he found out that all the galaxies are moving away from each other, and the farther away they are, the faster they're moving. So basically, the universe, space-time itself, is expanding. And if you rewind the clock, it all comes back to a single point that is, when everything popped into existence and has been expanding ever since. And so that is what we call the Big Bang, the beginning of the universe, the expansion of space and time at a specific point in the time in the past.
One of the things that, I know my physics background is really very limited, but I recall that one element of that Big Bang is that it was really an explosion of light.
Yes. Which is what Genesis says. The interesting thing is, the first words of God in Genesis are, "Let there be light." So this explosion, this massive explosion of energy and light, like you say, is it's interesting how the author of Genesis
had that inspiration.
Yes.
I don't think it was just an intuition.
Yeah.
It was an inspiration.
Yeah.
Nobody, none of the neighbors. I've read the Enuma Elish and a number of the other Legends of Atrahasis and all these other creation stories, etc., from the pagans. Nobody had that idea that everything began with a word from which came light, and everything exists because of it.
Right. And it always seemed funny to me, too, that the sun was created on day 3. So how could there be light before the sun? And, of course, that's the Big Bang. Like you said, he was inspired by this explosion. And now what's most interesting, too, the Big Bang points to a transcendent creator beyond space and time who brought the universe into being from nothing. Because, like I said before, from nothing comes nothing. So if there is something, it has to have a cause. And you would think after this explosion at the Big Bang, this massive, very chaotic, that the universe would be totally random and unpredictable and just very a mess. But what we find...
So like when not that I would do this today, but there might have been a time in my past when I set off a firecracker or two.
Same thing. It doesn't cause order.
No, none of the pieces came down as a Da Vinci painting. It was just scraps of paper because it was random. So that's why this is an amazing issue.
Yes.
When we do explosions, it's just random.
It's a mess. But what we find in the universe is it's very ordered, it's very predictable, there's a lot of harmony and regularity in the universe. The sun rises, the sun sets, the seasons come, the seasons go, the moon phases, and everything is all very ordered and very predictable.
And we depend on it.
And we depend on it, and it's governed by the laws of physics. These laws of physics, one of the classic one that Einstein discovered and mathematically expressed is E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Now the interesting thing is, and there's many more laws of physics, force equals mass times acceleration, Isaac Newton, many more. But these can be expressed mathematically. And why is that? And also, why is it that we can figure them out? Do monkeys or giraffes or dolphins or chimpanzees, do they figure these laws out?
The closest was Trigger. He could add 3 and 2. That's about it.
But he still didn't get E equals mc squared.
No, he didn't.
And now the thing that's most interesting. And now the thing that's most interesting about, for example, E equals mc squared. Did Einstein create that law of nature, or did it exist before and he merely figured it out?
Right.
He figured it out. It existed before. So if it existed before, where did it come from? And it takes the greatest efforts of the finest human minds, Einstein, Newton, people like that, they weren't exactly dumb people. It takes the greatest efforts of the finest human minds to unlock and figure out these laws of nature. Then they surely must have come from a mind, capital M, far greater. And that would be God.
It's, again, it's a simple analogy, but, if I took 5 tons of Scrabble tiles and dumped them out of an airplane, and they randomly fell, I still would not get Macbeth. It would never equal, anything by Shakespeare. It wouldn't even equal one of his sonnets. You would never be able to find that. But here, again,
there's order.
There's
information.
There's a rational order.
Yes, it's intelligible.
And we are rational creatures who can
figure it out,
find it.
Right.
Takes us time.
Yes, and efforts.
Yeah.
And the greatest efforts of the finest human minds. But like I say, if it takes that kind of effort to figure it out, then it must have come from a mind far greater.
See, that's, and again, using an analogy from literature, not many people can write like Shakespeare. There's only one Shakespeare. And the rest of us try to understand what that genius said. And similarly, scientists look at the real world and try to find out what the genius created.
Yes. Now, what's most interesting, about 40 years ago, and this is actually very compelling evidence that a lot of people find just unbelievable. These laws of nature, they're not only intelligible, we can figure them out, and they're mathematically elegant, but they're finely tuned. There are about 20 different constants in the laws of nature whose values could be anything.
Right.
But they have a certain value, like the universal gravitational constant, for example. And
right. Just so that folks understand this, I don't want to lose folks here, that there are certain constant principles.
Constants like a number in these mathematical expressions of the laws of nature.
So the laws of nature that are constants.
Yes.
We know how to put that into numerical expression.
A value. We have figured out the value of that constant.
And those constants are just that. They're
a number. They're a number. And they're fixed. It's a fixed number. It could have been any number. For example, the universal gravitational constant G, it's kind of a complicated formula, but it's in the book. If they go to the book, they can get all this. But that value is a very specific value, 6.67 times 10 to the... Well, why is it not 6.2 or 7.3? Why is it 6.67, and how did it get that value? And what's most interesting, would it make a difference if it had any other value, another value? And what scientists have discovered is that there's, like I say, about 20 of these numbers, these constants in the mathematical expression of the laws of nature that are all set to precisely what they need to be for us to be here, for the universe to be habitable.
If, for instance, if the force of gravity were slightly different,
we wouldn't be here.
We would be flat.
Yeah, and the cosmological constant is 1, okay? The expansion rate of the universe right after the Big Bang. Okay. If that had have differed by 1 part in a quintillion, which is like 1 with 18 zeros after it, all the grains of sand on all the beaches in the world aren't even that. So if 1 grain of sand, if it had have differed by that much, if it had have been any faster, the universe would have flown apart, and you wouldn't have had time for gravity to pull the galaxies together and the planets and the stars and to form that. So if it was just 1 part in a quintillion faster, everything would have flown apart. If it was 1 part in a quintillion slower, everything would have gone out, and then it would have come back again. Gravity would have pulled it back, and we would have had the big crunch by now. So it's so precise. And like I say, there's about 20 of these numbers, and scientists are just amazed by them.
Speed of light is another one.
Yes, and there's many other ones. They're in the book. The strong nuclear force is another interesting one. That holds the protons and neutrons together in the nucleus of atoms. And if that differed by just a little bit, if it was a little bit stronger, then you wouldn't have any hydrogen, because all of the atoms would have neutrons in them. You see what I'm saying? They would all stick, all the protons would stick to a neutron. And so you wouldn't have any hydrogen. Well, if you didn't have any hydrogen, you wouldn't have any stars, for one thing, and you wouldn't have any water, so would we be here?
Yeah.
We wouldn't be here.
See, here's the amazing thing, that each one of these is so precise,
yes.
like 1 to the quadrillion.
Yeah.
Even the federal government doesn't spend that much money.
They're getting close with the debt, but no.
They've gotten up to trillions.
Yeah.
But there's quadrillion after that, and then quintillion.
Yeah.
And so this is an amazing number.
They call this the fine-tuning of the universe. Do you remember those old radios? I have to talk with the high school students. They don't know what these are. No. They always push seek. But you remember the radio dial you would turn and the thing would go across and you would tune in that radio station.
I even made a crystal radio, so we had to learn how to do that.
Good. So it's called the fine-tuning of the universe. There's like 20 dials on a wall, and all of them have been set to precisely what is needed to be for us to be here. If any one of them had differed by just a little bit, we wouldn't be here. It's also called the Anthropic Principle because anthropos, man, and it's...
Greek word for man is anthropos.
Yes, and so it's called the Anthropic Principle, which indicates that all these things are set for man, for us humans, to be here. And so, again, if there's fine-tuning in the universe to that precision, it sure seems a reasonable explanation is that there was a fine-tuner that set all those dials to precisely what they need to be.
As a counterexample, you know, when I did make a crystal radio, I could get one channel. Mm-hmm. That's as much fine-tune as I could come up with. And here you have these fine-tunings to the quadrillion, and then the likelihood that all 20 would be precisely what they are is an incredible number. The chance of that is 0.1 to...
Yeah. And scientists who originally dismissed the Big Bang, they're also not in favor of the theological implications of this fine-tuning. Mm-hmm. So there's an effort to try to find an escape hatch that would explain it by chance, and this is called the multiverse, and multiple universes that pop into existence, and all these parameters are different, and ours is set just right. But there's some good quotes in the book that are from some scientists who have actually said that, you know, we're never going to be able to detect these multiple universes, another universe, and so it's a matter of faith. You can believe in God or you can believe in multiple universes. The interesting thing is that multiple universes don't make moral demands.
Exactly.
And so people tend to go to where they're not going to be held accountable, at least they think.
Right. The other, if there are other universes, that's one of the theories. Well, there are other universes, but they don't make you a better or a worse person. They just doing their own thing. There's one other thing too that I've also been amazed at. You know, we live in the Milky Way, which is one of the galaxies, right? We are about 2/3 of the way out
in a
from
clear
the
area.
center.
Yeah.
If we were close to the center, there'd be so much light from the other stars.
And dust.
And that we could not see that there was a universe outside of it.
Right.
And so you've got creatures with rational minds living in a very finely tuned universe, 20 different elements to tune extremely precisely. And the people with that rational mind live close enough to see that it exists, but far enough out that we can look into the sky and ask questions.
Yeah. It's also called the local fine-tuning of the solar system. There's not only the fine-tuning of the universe, but there's fine-tuning in our solar system. And in addition, isn't it interesting that we have a clear atmosphere? That an oxygen-rich atmosphere, which we need to live, to breathe, is also clear. The atmosphere on Venus and is carbon-rich and it's opaque. So if people were on Venus, they wouldn't be able to see anything.
Right.
But we have a clear atmosphere and we can see with telescopes out into the universe beyond. And even without telescopes. And what's also interesting, they've also found that these solar eclipses, why is it that the sun, as big as it is and as far away as it is, the moon perfectly covers it from our perspective here on Earth? And, you know, why are these the same size from our perspective? And it's interesting that this has been the cause of many scientific discoveries, the solar eclipses. They verified Einstein's general theory of relativity using solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse. They were able to observe the light bending around the sun because the stars appeared to move, you know, from where it was during a total solar eclipse. They would have never seen that had they not had a total solar eclipse. So there are a lot of reasons. This is discussed in the book, The Local Fine-Tuning of the Universe, of the solar system.
And not only the fine-tuning of the solar system, the Earth itself is fine-tuned.
Yeah, there's so many things.
If the Earth did not have a molten center,
The magnetic,
you can have the magnetic pull and the spin,
right.
and you also have to have the continents floating.
the
Tectonic plates have to float, or else you wouldn't be able to have life.
All of it's here.
Yeah.
And the key word with this book, The Reality of God, The Layman's Guide to Scientific Evidence for the Creator, the key word is layman. It's written in plain English. I have distilled and condensed and summarized in a clear and concise way all these arguments, and so many people are buying this as a gift for their children. I had one lady buy 6 copies, one for each of her 5 kids, and her husband as well. And so a lot of people are buying
Most wives say they do have to raise their husbands.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to move on, if we can, to the first C was the cosmos. And there's 2 more C's. Do we have time to talk about that?
We don't have time for 2. We have about 3 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll give you a sneak preview. It's our consciousness, our human consciousness.
Which we've been hinting at.
Right. And it also, we have these 5 desires for transcendental experiences that we cannot experience on earth. And basically, we're seeking God through that. It's described in the book. But we seek perfect truth. We seek perfect love. We seek perfect beauty. There are 5 of these things that we seek. Could you imagine scientists ever saying, you know, this search for knowledge, this search for truth, that we've quit, we're going to quit, we know everything about everything? We know there's more. We know there's more out there that we don't know. Well, how do we know there's more? How do we have this awareness of the more when we know what we know is not enough? Why? Why do we have that awareness of the more? So we're seeking more than what we know, and we know we don't know it all. Well, why is that? And if we have these desires, perfect love, for example, you know, we desire to be loved perfectly and all. And if we are seeking the fulfillment, the only fulfillment, it's beyond this world. And if we have desires that cannot be fulfilled in this world, we don't have perfect knowledge, we don't have perfect love, then we are made, as C.S. Lewis said, for another world. And St. Augustine said it beautifully, that our hearts are restless until they find their rest in God. And so we're seeking God, who is perfect knowledge, perfect love, perfect beauty, perfect goodness and justice, and perfect home.
Whereas, in contrast, my cats, once they've had enough to eat,
they're happy.
And enough to drink,
Yep.
they don't sit up and look at the universe.
And E equals
they
MC
take
squared.
a nap.
Yep. They fall asleep. Yeah. And then very quickly, so the first C is the cosmos and the science, and then the second C is our consciousness, talked about in here, and these desires for these 5 transcendentals. The third C, within human nature, we're talking about these last 2 C's, are within human nature, there's compelling evidence of God's existence. The last one is our conscience. We all know some things are right and some things are wrong. We have this awareness of right and wrong that the animals don't have unless if they've been trained. But we have this. It's innate. All cultures, everywhere, know that certain things are right and certain things are wrong.
And that Lewis brought out, no matter what culture you went to, you can argue with them that it's not fair,
right,
and appeal to a basic principle of what fair means.
Right.
And people may argue and disagree, but they at least would know that is an issue about being fair or not.
Yeah. So our conscience has been called the voice of God in our soul. It is God trying to, we have a free will. We're not puppets. We're not driven by instinct. We have a choice. But God is still trying to guide us, get us to choose the right thing, but we still are free to do the wrong thing. So this is God working in us. It's evidence of God's, still today, He cares about each and every one of our moral choices. He's not a deistic God that fired it all off and then walked away.
Right.
He's with us today in our conscience, speaking to us. And we all know it. We all can feel it. And so that's evidence of God's existence as well. The third C.
Cool. Well, we have to take a break. Again, I want to let you know that it's the Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America, CAINA, C-A-I-N-A. You can go to cainaweb.org, C-A-I-N-A-W-E-B, cainaweb.org. Or you can call them 877-718-0826. But before you go to their website or call them, please stay with us. We're going to be back in a couple minutes. We want to get your questions and comments, as well as those of our studio audience, so please stay with us. Thank you. Welcome back. First of all, I want to invite you to come here to beautiful Irondale, Alabama, right next door to Birmingham, and come and be part of our programs and our praying. If you can, call our pilgrimage department, 205-271-2966, or go to the website, EWTN.com. They'll give information about scheduling of masses, times for shows, tours of the studios, information how to get up to Hansfield to pray with the sisters, and a place to stay and eat. So we'd love to have you come down here. If it's any encouragement, yeah, even yesterday I already saw the forsythia in blooming. So that's a good thing. Ready for some questions?
Sure.
Let's start off. We have Michael on the line. Hello, Michael.
Hi, Fowler.
Hi, where are you from?
Sewell, New Jersey.
Great to have you. Is that north or south?
That's south.
Okay. So what's your question?
My question is, I'd like to know, has anyone pinpointed the exact location, the point of the Big Bang explosion? And would that be considered the center of our universe?
Okay, great question.
It is a great question, Father. Thank you, Michael. Yes, I think you could say that the center of the, if everything's been expanding, then if you rewind the clock, where it comes back to in the middle would be that point. But what's most interesting about the Big Bang Theory is that space and time, matter and energy all came into existence at that point. So space itself came into existence at that point, as well as time. So you can't speak about, before the Big Bang or out, a space, somewhere in space that this Big Bang happened, because there was no space. So it all happened about 13.7 billion years ago.
And one of the things about the biblical understanding that relates to it is, again, looking at the ancient neighbors. They saw the sun and the moon and the stars were created by the god Marduk in the Enuma Elish to, quote, control the destinies of gods and men. That the stars were foretelling the horoscope, that even the gods had to be subject to the fate. Whereas in the Bible, it is simply to mark off the times and seasons. It's God's clock. And because only with the existence of the planets and galaxies and stuff do you have time, and the Old Testament demythologizes the universe. It says, no, it's just for telling time.
Yeah, trees are not gods. The sun and the moon are not gods.
Nothing
It's
is
all,
God.
and science has shown too that God is beyond space and beyond time.
Right.
Science technically can't address anything beyond space and time, but if God exists, He is beyond space and time. To be able to set these dials, fire this thing off, create these laws, that sort of thing.
And that's one of the elements of science being possible, to the extent that we've seen develop in a Judeo-Christian society,
Right.
because all of creation was demythologized.
Right.
If there are tree naiads and dyads and water sprites and nymphs and all these things living in all the elements, you better not study them, because they might get you.
Yeah.
But if they're just water that are creatures, and only God is God and no creature is,
Right.
then you can study them.
We're basically-
we make it possible to be scientists.
Correct. Christianity has done that because the early scientists were all devout Christians, and they felt like they were uncovering the handiwork of God. They were
Right.
discovering how God put the universe together, how God put the world together, and they were merely uncovering His handiwork. And so that's separate from God. It's not God. It's His handiwork.
Copernicus was a priest.
Priest, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I saw recently a quote. Martin Luther couldn't stand him. He thought, this is a crazy idea that the sun is the center of the solar system. But he was right.
Yeah.
Young man, where are you from?
Sugar Land, Texas.
Aren't you something? So what is your question?
I've found that when dialoguing with atheists or agnostics, and you start to get into some of these truths, that they will try and turn it around on you by trying to point out inconsistencies of Scripture, in particular evolution and Adam and Eve. How would you respond to that?
Okay, good question. Thank you.
And we can't go to all the detail, but just how would you begin to deal with that?
Well, I would tell them to go to our website, canoweb.org, and buy the book and read part 2, which deals with evolution. Okay?
Wait a minute,
and
I
creation.
didn't ask you to do a sales.
But a brief preview. We have to understand, and as Catholics, the Catechism is very clear when it's talking about the creation stories in Genesis, that the Catechism is clear that that is symbolic language. It is figurative language. It uses those words many times. And I like to say that this is a teaching story. It's like a parable. When Jesus told the parable of the prodigal son, did there really have to be a guy who took his inheritance and went off to Egypt and squandered it? That didn't have to literally happen in order for the truths that he was trying to teach in that parable to be taught. And the truths are, of course, that God is like that Father. He's waiting, He's welcoming for us to come to our senses and turn to Him. And so it's these deeper truths, the deeper religious truths are what we see and what we can learn from the Genesis creation story. The plot, 6 24-hour days, that's not necessarily true. What's important is that God created everything. He created it from nothing. He created it in an orderly and sequential manner over a period of time, and He created it good. Over and over we hear that.
Right. Except the second day, when He made the firmament. That was the one time He did not say it was good. He didn't say it was bad. He just didn't say it was good. Mm-hmm. And I always like to point out, the second day in the Jewish week is Monday. Even God did not like Mondays, and that's in your Bible.
Well, see, that's the religious truth He's trying to get across there, isn't it?
But one of the things, too, even when you talk about days, day is a relative term. Yes. On Earth, it's a 24.28 period of time mm-hmm. as the Earth spins on its axis. Mm-hmm. But it could be, a day might be different on other planets and mm-hmm. such as that. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about days before the sun, moon, and stars existed,
and the Earth's spinning,
then you've got sidereal days. Yeah. The billions of years that it would take mm-hmm. for the galaxies mm-hmm. to spin around.
It's important to note that Pope Benedict XVI, he said it as clearly as anybody. The Bible is not a manual of science. That's what he said.
And St. Augustine said the same thing.
Yes, and so we're not, God didn't inspire Scripture to save us the trouble of trying to do science to figure out how the universe is put together. Religion covers the who and the why. Science covers the how and the when.
The mechanics.
So the mechanics. So they complement each other, and they're both needed in the search for truth. You can't just use one or the other. It has to be both. We have to know not only the how, that science, and the when, but the who and the why. Why is all this here, and why are we here? And right. These bigger questions.
And where is it going?
Where is it going?
Science can't tell you that.
No.
And it's something that is a good tool. And, it's also an issue that is dealing with very ephemeral kind of knowledge in a sense, because science is always correcting itself.
Yes.
And that's part of the state, and that's a good part.
It is a good.
Let's go to Ruth. Hello, Ruth.
Hello.
Hi, where are you from?
Nebraska.
Great. And what's your question?
Well, I know that Einstein believed in God, but did he believe in Him because of faith, or did he believe in Him because he's a scientist?
Interesting
and I'll hang
question.
Up now so I can hear your answer.
Thank you, Ruth. That's a very interesting question.
Thank you, Ruth. Yes, Einstein had, you read different things and you get confusing views about his faith. He's talked about the order and intelligibility in the universe, points to a rational mind behind it all. He said that he's, read and was learned on the Bible, including the New Testament, even though he was Jewish as a child, and he saw Jesus, this luminous figure in there. But his... It's a fuzzy picture, his faith, where he...
it's not precise what he believed. Yeah. But he did believe, and I don't, as I recall from just learning a little bit about his life, he wasn't always quite so committed to traditional Jewish morality.
More like a deist.
And also more like a hound dog. Yeah. But he's, but he didn't have... some issues about that, and he may have been sort of putting that off on the side. But he did believe that there was, theoretically.
There's a rational basis to the universe. That he understood that.
Yep. All right. I have a question, sir. Where are you from?
Father, I'm from beautiful Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Aren't you some? And what can we do for you here?
Mike, there's among Christians, there is the theory of creationism, which I believe is 3 distinct 2,000-year periods, that the earth was created and will exist for a total of only 6,000 years. So then how do we equate that or discuss that with people in light of the fact that we believe that the earth is approximately, at least the universe is approximately 13.5 billion years old?
Good question. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's important to again go back to our texts. The Bible is not meant to be a manual of science. We don't look to the Bible for scientific truth. We look to the Bible for religious truth, for salvation truth. And especially in the creation stories in the first chapters of Genesis. It's these religious truths that are important. And so we have to be careful about this 6,000-year time period, and some Christians tend to think the universe is only 6,000 years old and that sort of thing. And I think that the Catholics, because they understand there are different genres of literature in the Bible, and that the Genesis creation stories are akin to a parable, a teaching story, where the plot doesn't have to be literally true, but the religious truths trying to be conveyed are what is true. Because we have this view, and we don't have to, everything's not staked on the truth, so to speak, of the Bible. A lot of Protestants, I think, if they think that there's one thing wrong with the Bible, it doesn't have something true, then the whole edifice falls apart, so they're a little bit weak they put science and faith in conflict in that way. But Catholics have no problem accepting that science, says certain things and religion says things in a different way. And then they go together. And evolution, I think, is, like I said, it's a much deeper topic than what we can get into here. But I think the Catholic Church has covered this well. The latest teachings by most of the popes, Benedict particular, and Cardinal Schornborn from Austria, and others as well, and even in the Catechism, it points to the fact that there are no difficulties. In fact, that's what Pope John Paul II said. He said, there are no difficulties in explaining the origin of man in regard to the body by means of the theory of evolution. And what he's getting at there is that the body could have evolved from apes or whatever, but that what makes us truly human is when God imparted that soul into those first pre-humans, and that's when they became human. And it's the body and soul together, as Michelangelo showed so beautifully on the roof of the Sistine Chapel, that when God imparted that soul into Adam's body, then he became human. Body and soul together. Humans are body and soul. And so it doesn't matter from a Catholic point of view whether our bodies evolved from apes or whatever, that what makes us truly human is when God put that soul in there.
And here's one of the things, too, I would add here. The Catholic Church has not defined that you must believe in evolution.
Correct. They have not.
They have not defined that you must have a 24-hour, 6 days.
Right.
We leave that, fairly much open for interpretation. We don't have definitions. A Catholic can be a creationist. They can be a good Catholic.
But then they would have issues with science.
Yeah,
there would be that conflict.
Right. But they could deal with those issues, and a lot of creationists believe that they can overcome the scientific issues. But we also say that you can have a sense of evolution so long as you know that there is a radical difference between the rational soul of a human being and that did not evolve, that is directly created by God in each individual.
Correct.
And that's a very important distinction. And there's room for that discussion. I don't know that there's room for some of the heat
Yeah, I know.
Some people just get furious and outraged.
Yeah.
And at this point, when we have to deal with the atheists so much as we do, we have to watch some of our charity on how we deal with these issues, neither being snide to each other, trying to have respect for that difference, and come to deal with rational discussions about why one is correct or not. Argue that out, but that hostility is not necessary. And I think we have to be very careful about that because there are bigger issues at stake. The other thing too is with Darwin's theory, and this is why people are so nervous.
Yes.
People are trying to use that to dismiss
Disprove
God.
Yes.
And that to make human beings, we're just animals.
Yeah.
And this is what the Catholic Church would also absolutely reject.
Yes.
So we'll take a look. Well, let's take a look at another caller. Hello, Lynn.
Yes.
Hi, where are you from?
Curie Beach, North Carolina.
How's that weather up there?
Blowing like crazy.
Yeah, I know it. I heard it's a lot of tornadoes going on. I want to keep people up in that area in our prayers because there's a lot of dangerous tornadoes going on.
The ocean is letting us know that God is in charge.
All right, well, stay out. Don't go swimming.
Don't worry.
Yeah. So what's your question, dear?
Well, Darwin's theory has never been proven as fact, to my knowledge. But it's been accepted in schools as a fact. It's being taught in schools as if it were a fact. How did that happen?
All right. And, one of the things, let me give some nuance to that. Darwin's theory has not been proven. That there was this natural selection.
The mechanism.
Yeah, the mechanism.
Yeah.
That's not been proven.
To explain everything. It certainly
And
can.
as a matter of fact, I don't think that as Darwin stated his theory of evolution, you don't find many scientists holding that. It's far more complicated than anything he was able to talk about.
Yeah.
So just to nuance what is being said there. What the question is, why did it become so dominant in our schools?
I think in large part, I don't know for sure the answer to that question, but it seems to me it's possible because so many of the top scientists are atheists. They prefer that worldview, maybe because then they're not held accountable. That there was this worldview and they saw, like even Richard Dawkins has said that Darwin makes it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, that he can see that, Darwinism can justify his atheism. But I would like to go back and again talk about what's in the book here, what the Catholic Church teaches. The Catholic Church teaches, and to understand evolution, we have to understand that there are 4 types of causes. There are primary causes and secondary causes. There are intelligent causes and there are natural causes. So just because something can be explained by a natural cause doesn't mean that God is not there. For example, if this mechanism, natural selection, can explain certain things, doesn't mean that God's not acting there. Because Catholics, of course, believe that God is the primary and intelligent cause behind it all. For example, let me ask you a question. Did Michelangelo or his chisel carve the Pieta? It's both, right?
Yeah.
It's both.
Because that chisel didn't do anything without him.
Right. So he's the primary and intelligent cause. His mind saw in that block that beautiful statue, and he carved that out, and it was also, he's the primary cause and the intelligent cause behind it. But he used a tool, and that tool
His mind couldn't do it by itself.
It couldn't do it by itself, and the tool couldn't do it. But the tool is a secondary cause in the hand of a primary and intelligent cause. It's a natural cause also, because imagine he had been working 6 months on this statue, and he's working on Mary's nose, and he doesn't understand force and physics and how hard to chip and what angle, and he hits it and the nose pops off. He had to know natural causes, and he had to work with those. So the same thing, I think, is the Catholic perspective on evolution is a similar thing, that God is the primary and intelligent intelligent cause behind it all. These mechanisms are secondary causes. They're not primary, they're secondary. For example, the Darwinian mechanism of natural selection acting on what appear to us to be random genetic mutations, that's a secondary cause. That is not a primary cause. The mistake in the schools and on TV and everything is that never do they say that God had anything to do with it. It's always presented as if nature, these natural causes, are primary. But we know they're secondary, acting on their own.
Right.
We know they're just merely a tool in the hands of the Creator. Now, the way you can see this clearly is to step back. You can look at the Mona Lisa with a magnifying glass, and you can see the brush strokes, and you can know how, Leonardo da Vinci did all that, but you miss the big picture. When you step back, then you see the smile. Well, the same thing is true with evolution. It has been said, and I'll never forget, I read it the first time, was on a coworker's cubicle wall, a little index card, and it's an actual quote, and that the first element after the Big Bang, as we know, was hydrogen. And so what they're trying to teach, if you stop and think about it, and you back up and you look, okay, does this really make any sense? What they're trying to teach in schools and in the theory of evolution, that these natural causes are primary and not secondary. What they're trying to say is the first element after the Big Bang, hydrogen, is a gas which, given enough time, just turns into people. Now, this is ridiculous, to think that hydrogen just could have turned into people without an intelligent and primary cause guiding that process. Now, that is what happened. Over 13.7 billion years, we're here. And it all started with hydrogen after the Big Bang. So there had to clearly be, in order for that to happen, there had to be a primary and intelligent cause guiding that process. It couldn't have happened just by filling up this room and coming back 13 billion years later, you're going to have people? There has to be some cause behind it. That's the big picture when you step back.
And I think that's an important thing. But also, to her question, that you see in states like Kansas that the option of bringing in that aspect of the Creator and the intelligent cause, the primary and intelligent cause, can't be done.
It's true.
So that there's more to it. Back until the Scopes trial in Tennessee, you were not allowed to teach Darwin. And now another kind of orthodoxy doesn't permit you to teach anything but that approach. And so this is something where I think is more what she's trying to deal with, that we need to have, the option is not allowed by the courts.
Right. And I think one of the reasons is because science and religion are presented as alternatives, and sometimes we look for God in the gaps. There's been that tendency. And even within the intelligent design movement, there's an explanatory filter that if something can't be explained by chance or by necessity, a law of nature, then it must be design. Well, from a Catholic point of view, God works through chance and works through necessity. Those are secondary causes. Those are tools in His hand. And the design is evident when you step back and you look at it, from the bigger picture. That's when we see the design. So in the Catholic theology, there's no conflict between, we're not a God of the gaps. We don't believe in the God of the gaps, where we find God only when science hasn't spoken. We find God in what science has discovered, because there's just no way this could have happened without a primary and intelligent cause. Again, it's discussed more fully in the book.
Right. So, and this is where also need to learn to use good logic.
Yes.
I want to, again, encourage you to contact Catholic Apologetics Institute of North America. You can go to cainaweb.org, CAINA web.org. Phone number 877-718-0826. And thank you much for being with us. I want to give you all a blessing. May Almighty God bless you and keep you, cause His face to shine upon you, and lead you in all of His ways by His peace, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. We can have this kind of discussion and try to integrate our faith and science and deal with some of these big issues and stir up some good discussion only because this network is brought to you by you. You make it possible. That's how mothers set this up. So that we need to have you keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill. Because otherwise, we won't be able to pay any of our bills. God bless you, and thank you very much.